Hello and welcome to a final 2020 edition of our two Irish guys discussing software. Brendan, myself, Tomás O'Leary. How are you, Brendan?
I'm good. It's good. We got here, which is,
it's been a tricky year.
Yeah,
tricky year. But we've had fun.
It's been a blast.
No, we've had fun. Listen, we've had loads of people on our show. Yeah. We've done a show. We've had loads of new listeners. It's been a success, From
a podcast perspective, I think it's been very good.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about, a podcast and how we got on in 2020. So we actually got a good little show here, a shorter show than normal. We have no guests, it's just you and I. What we're going to do is the following. We're going to review 2020, okay? We're going to look at who we spoke to during the year, see if you remember them all. Mm-hmm. Okay, a little test on that. We'll have a look at, maybe ask you your favourite stories of 2020 as well.
There are a few. There were quite a few. I've had to do a bit of a review. Picked out a top 3 or 4.
I always love your stories, great stories. And we're going to have a little tidbit, a review of the best little bits from IBM. We have to talk about IBM. What did we see them doing in the marketplace? What did our spies tell us? What did our contacts in the market tell us what was going on?
Good news stories, aren't they?
Oh, they're going to like these stories. They're going to like these stories. And we're going to finish up with a little bit of prediction for 2021. What do we think is going to happen? We might end up mentioning a little bit of COVID, I'm sure, but we'll try and stay clear.
A bit of amateur futurism.
Oh God, if we can stay clear of that topic, it would be great. Yeah. Listen, let's start with, who did we have? We had a cracking year, to be honest with you. We had some really, really good guests, and that's one of our challenges for 2021. Who's going to follow? I mean, I had a couple of really good highlights from the year. I mean, one of my favourite ones was our chat with Richard Beaumont early on at the beginning of the year. Richard Beaumont, you may remember, was the procurement specialist we had met in Frankfurt, and I had met in Amsterdam kind of a year or so before that.
Yeah.
He was particularly good because actually he was in Canada. He was stuck in Canada.
He was in Vancouver, I think, was he?
Yeah, he was in Vancouver. He was stuck in Vancouver in a hotel room. His wife was sick or something. Was something going on?
Yeah.
Anyway, he was brilliant, but they had to do the podcast from the toilet, and he lost power in the hotel at one stage, and he was working off his phone. It was the most trick, and it was amazing.
He proved to be quite resilient, which we love.
We had Dan Eilert, ex-Financial Times reporter and marketing guru and specialist, came on the show. He had loads of good advice for the mega vendors. Martin Thompson from the iTerm Review does his own does his own podcast, very good podcast as well.
We might see if we can get an invite onto his, a reverse invite.
That's a very. How come we didn't get an invite?
I don't know why we didn't get an invite.
Martin Thompson, if you're listening, get that invite out. So Martin Thompson, obviously, he is the SAM guru, if you ask me, and knows everything about. We even had kind of people with high IQs on our podcast.
Certainly higher than ours.
We had 2 doctors. Dr. Amima Hyder and Dr. Christian Filoni.
Very impressive.
Oh my God, listen, these guys, we didn't even understand the questions, let alone the answers.
No, they know their subject matter, there's no doubt about it.
Between data centers and security, we covered a lot there, and it got very technical at times. I loved the chat with David Hoole.
David.
Do you remember the futurist?
Futurist, yeah. I was reading his on his website last night, actually, So seeing if I could see what his predictions were for 2021.
Yeah.
And could I steal them? But more on that later on. But he was the guy who said the 2020s will be the most disruptive decade in history. And he's not wrong so far. I don't think he predicted a pandemic, but I think he's probably not. He seems to be on the money. It's been very disruptive.
He wrote a great book on 2020. Actually, I read it. It's a really short book, really good, very insightful. Yeah, listen, that guy knows what he's talking about, so he's brilliant.
If you want to pick a topic, go to his website on economics, philosophy, politics, and his future outlook.
And crime probably doesn't cover crime because we had Chris White, ex-MI5.
Oh, I love Chris.
Remember the costumes negotiator?
Yeah.
That was the best.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like that. What he described is almost identical to how
a super metaphor.
Like we're going to talk about later some of the best bits from IBM and some of the audit tactics that go on. The hostage.
Yeah, well, we've talked about don't be held hostage for a long time. By the mega vendors, and he was on point
Yeah.
Very interesting guy. Definitely worth listening back to that podcast if you haven't.
Yeah. And if you do get arrested, we had a lot of lawyers. we had
well protected.
We had one of the top IP barristers in Europe, Guy Tritton. We had Dan Shefford, the man who took on Google and won. The Danish lawyer we know well, based in Paris. Is also advisor to UNESCO, to the French government, lobbyist in the European Union. He's a fantastic guy. And we had only the last episode, Pam Fulmer. Pam was just brilliant.
The nuggets of wisdom. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You know, well, I've been going on about ABC, for a long time. Always be closing.
Yeah. Well, as a sales guy.
I think we heard another version.
Oh yeah. Audit, bargain, close, tactic.
Bargain, close.
Oh my God.
Loved it.
It's just unbelievable.
There's some great nuggets of wisdom in those 3 podcasts if anybody's got the time.
Yeah. Well, all our listeners do, I'm sure.
We might do a little snippets of it or something.
Yeah. Who else did we have? Oh God, we had, remember Todd Uderstad. Todd with his own podcast.
Yeah.
From founder to
They're
CEO.
great podcasts.
Oh my God. But do you remember what was the guy from MailChimp?
MailChimp.
And the quote, what was that quote?
The quote is, no one is coming.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Because if you think about what's going on, like we're just in a situation here in Europe at the moment where borders are closed and there's nobody came. Nobody's allowed to come.
Yeah, and I was very poignant. Yeah. And I've read a couple of books about leadership and about what do you do in a crisis and who do you turn to. But that remark definitely stands out.
Yeah, for sure. We had Paul Arnrich, specialist IBM mainframe guy. What was it? Z System Z. The mainframe.
I still don't know.
I know. I mean, there was the toilet from Japan that was called the System Z, I think it was.
Yeah.
My son wanted one of those.
Favorites,
yeah. Well, he was delighted with he loved Japanese toilets after spending. I mean, just over a year ago, we were in Japan. Think about that.
Yeah.
You couldn't get there now.
We'll be going back for a while.
Oh my God, I missed that. But yeah, one of the things we did do, we predicted the IBM split. I know you're going to maybe touch on that later.
Yeah. I think in podcast 1. It came up, which is this is podcast 20, which is the wrap up for 2020. But in podcast 1, it came up. You mentioned it. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
Should they split? So it's been on our minds for a while.
Yeah, and we talked about it to Paul, and he was he wasn't sure. I think he poo-pooed the idea a little bit, but we were proven right.
Yeah, moments later.
Within a few weeks, they were splitting the company. And finally, we had our very good friend and colleague Rowan O'Donoghue. Joined us for our first original guest.
Yeah, took us 20 podcasts to get him on.
He did, but he was brilliant, and he came on with Christian Fellini. And if you're any of you follow us on LinkedIn, you must check out his Christmas jacket. It was special. Very impressive. Very impressive. Yeah. In the photograph on LinkedIn. But no, we have. A cracking set of people we met, and really enjoyed it.
Now that we review it, that's a pretty impressive lineup.
Yeah.
So your challenge for 2021 is to see if you can make it as good as 2020.
Yeah, I think actually one of my predictions 21, you're going to get all the guests in 2021.
You can come up with the stories then.
Well, then tell me about the stories. What were the stories that you love? Because you had some, to be fair, you had some cracking stories.
Yeah, there were quite a few. It's been an interesting year. Obviously, we've had stock markets going through the roof. We've had the coronavirus moving everybody to home working. We've had acquisitions. We've had mergers. We've had divestitures. But the number one story of them all, straight into number one without any hesitation, was, speaking of IBM and our prediction of 20 podcasts ago, was that IBM would split.
I thought you were going to say the Zoom overtaking IBM in share price. So
no, that's funny. Actually, there's Zoom are 109 worth 109 billion compared to IBM. Mind you, Zoom are also worth more than Boeing. So
well, I wouldn't get into that.
Let's see what happens next year. But
but you're right. Yeah, the split was a credible story.
But look, it's been coming. You called it. We've been looking at the numbers. Their valuation has been dropping consistently over 2 decades. They were worth over 110 billion at one point. They're now worth less than 80 billion.
When 110 billion was worth something. Like think about it. 110 billion today is probably relatively small compared to Microsoft
20 years ago. You know, that was huge. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
110 billion today. Yeah, look, Zoom is worth 110 billion. So, and what have they got? You know, a work from home application, right? So, you know, an evaluation of 170 times revenue or something crazy like that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a real company with great products, mainframes, on-prem software, global technology business. But everything's been kind of tanking ever since.
Yeah.
And we can probably talk about Ginny Rometty in a minute. But yeah, she managed to take 20 billion off their annual revenues over a period of her tenure, 12 years, I think it was,
including buying lots and lots of companies. They bought hundreds of companies.
32 billion. Buying Red Hat
on its own.
But basically oversaw decades of decline. 22 consecutive quarters of declining revenue at one stage, and and all during that period got paid gargantuan amount of money for doing so. So she must have had some stories, but yeah. So they've decided to sell off, I suppose, the declining GTS part of the business and keep the good bits into IBM, and the GTS business is going to be sold into. It's been put into a company called Nuco. Haven't heard yet what Nuco is.
I think they've got to keep that name. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah, creative enough to come up with something different. And then on the back of that, we kind of said, Jesus, what's going to happen to the workforce? Presumably, if GTS is declining and their order book is declining, folks are going to lose their jobs, and that's exactly what we're now seeing all over Europe. That there is a phrase we learned during 2020, which is being resource actioned. Which we weren't sure what that was. It sounds like, I'm being actioned. Resource action basically means, there's layoffs. And we've seen layoffs all the way throughout the globe. Basically, we've seen layoffs all the way down to Australia. Thousands of layoffs in Europe on the back of that split. So a huge...
resource action. It's like a term a lawyer would come up with. Now, I know we like a lot of lawyers, and we had three lawyer guests during the year, and actually one of them came twice, Guy. Resource action, definitely too many lawyers in the room.
Well, IBM have a lot of lawyers. I mean, even during the period of Ginny's tenure over those 12 years, we'll talk about her in a minute, but they were in court quite a lot, actually, about with from what we read, with anti-ageism and a lot of their older workforce being laid off. Replacing them with newer people. I mean, it's the older workforce that have all the knowledge of all the technology, all the on-prem technology that generates 6 billion of revenue, but yet they're looking to put them out to pasture and replace them with younger people because they're focused on AI and cloud and hybrid cloud, and hence why they bought Red Hat. So we've seen them in court over that, and we've seen them in court, during Ginny's period because they haven't been paying salespeople commission. I mean, there's lots of stories online about that.
And we've been finding it easier to find the bad news stories, actually.
Well, certainly about
all of them, but not just IBM, but all of them. But
apart from Microsoft, we've always found it hard. Throughout the year, we've really struggled to find a bad news story about Microsoft. It just seems to be like every division. When I look at their last quarter's earnings, every single division of Microsoft was on the up.
Maybe we should make that a prediction for 21.
That we're going to find a bad news story. I think we just need to look harder. Maybe I mean, it's easy to find bad news stories about Larry and good old Oracle. We come back to them, but definitely number one story is IBM has split up. Let's see if maybe we'll see further divisions of IBM in the next decade. That could be a prediction.
Yeah. So number two then.
Well, number two, I've mentioned her already. I mean, Ginny Rometty stepping down and Arvind Krishna taking over. I mean, that was the story that came first. So that was in January. And then Arvind Krishna took over in January. And
she hasn't quite gone.
Well, I think she's chairperson.
Yeah, I thought she'd left. But the next thing she turns up at the news conference... holding hands. I can't. He's not allowed to go and have this conversation. Arvind can't go on his own.
Yeah,
Ginny's there babysitting.
It's a bit like watching Alec Ferguson, in UK Premiership football, still sitting in the stands as all the other managers come through. He hasn't gone away, and she hasn't gone away. But what did she achieve? I mean, I think a share price decline of 26% under her tenure. Meanwhile, the S&P surged about 160%. So just totally against the run of the market. As I mentioned In January 28th, it was 22nd consecutive quarters of declining revenue.
Yeah.
So she did a good job there. Company-wide efforts, you could say, to kind of find older workers and get rid of them. And meanwhile, she got paid 20 million, I think, in 2019 for growing the revenue of the company in that year by 0.1%. So, well done to her.
And she's still sitting in the stand. Yeah. I think that
Spent a couple of billion before she left, 30 billion. Obviously, a big bet on hybrid cloud, where they've been struggling. They've lost the public cloud race. That's been swallowed up by Amazon and Azure. They're not going to get that back. So they're really going for the hybrid cloud model in a big way.
And I think, excuse the pun, but I think the Ginny Romity cloud hangs over Arvind Krishna into 2021 for sure.
It's definitely nebulous, that's for sure.
And what about number 3? What have you got?
Well, number 3 is, I suppose in some ways it's a sad story, but it's an interesting one in that you can't deny that the coronavirus had a big impact on stocks, how we work, the technology we use during like the last 9 months or 10 months. It's just been seismic. Talk about Joseph Schumpeter and disruptive technology and disruptive markets are well known and are one of our favourite Austrian economists. We all went into lockdown of various natures back in the spring, and the tech stocks went crazy. The likes of Microsoft and Teams went from 120 daily active users to over 120 million daily active users to over 300 million. We saw Zoom increase its revenues by over 400% year on year. So I think its Q3 revenues, if I recall, from 2020 were 777 million. Which was an almost 400% increase over December 19, which wasn't too bad at 190 million or something, but all because of people who are working from home, people switched to online.
That's at a quarter.
Pardon?
That's in 1 quarter.
That's the year on year increase from 2019 to 2020. So in a year they increased their revenues by 600 million basically, which is a 400% increase. Next quarter they're predicting 800 million. So that's why they're now worth more than IBM. But
still crazy multiples there.
Crazy multiples. Oh yeah, like it's a multiple of 170 times revenue or something. Yeah. So we'd like to have a little firm that does that. Yeah. But look at the stocks. So we all thought, the stocks, tech stocks will tank. People won't be buying technology. Nobody's going to, vendor or procurement decisions we put on hold. Tenders will be parked and put on the shelf. But Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Alphabet, Microsoft, all their shares have risen astronomically throughout the year, and the Nasdaq is at, I think, its highest point ever. It was at about 6,000, 7,000 in about April of 2020, and it's now at the dizzy heights of 28,000 and rising. And I looked at it over the last 5 years actually to see, was this just an annual kind of blip? But it isn't really actually. These tech stocks have been rising fairly consistently over the last 5 years, but this year has been,
and we're seeing crazy. The mega vendors being passed out here all over the place. Like you got Salesforce passing out Oracle, you talked about Zoom passing out IBM. We've got it happen. Yeah. The only guys that actually mentioned, maybe that's why we're struggling to find bad stories about it. Microsoft's the only mega vendor that's up there, staying up there. Everybody else is falling back.
Salesforce, had a bit of a blip. At the end of their last quarter, they acquired Slack and they dropped, something like $40 fell off their share price, something worth something like 50 billion last quarter. But it's a small drop in the ocean because they have been rising and they're kind of steady now. Yeah. And maybe it was just on the surprising price they paid for Slack of 24 billion, which is definitely above market value. And so they've had a little bit of a drop, but they're still worth more than Oracle. Yeah,
but they're all worth more. Like DocuSign, anybody, they're all good. What was it? DocuSign was more than United Airlines.
DocuSign.
That wasn't too difficult. Probably
joined the Dow and knocked United Airlines out of the Dow this year. That's happened to a few other very traditional stocks, not just tech stocks like ExxonMobil, etc., fell out of the Dow. So some of the tech stocks, are replacing the traditional stocks that we'd expect to be there, the oil and gas companies, etc., airline companies. Yeah.
So somebody was saying recently that it was supposed to be a long decade for big oil. I think it's been a long 20 for big oil. Yeah, no, I think it's... So that, your top 3, did you have any other ones?
Yeah, I think I've kind of talked about the top three. Top, they kind of blend into one another. Really, I mean, I suppose the big ones was the big kind of things of the year.
What was the big story? The one that the mega vendor trying to buy. What was it? They were trying to buy that little app.
Well, Salesforce.
No, TikTok. Wasn't it?
TikTok. Sorry, that is probably number 4. Yeah, there's so many stories. Yeah, TikTok, Oracle, Walmart, Trump. I mean,
it's everything. It covers political intrigue,
politics. International trade, tariffs,
China, US.
Covert ops, secrecy, everything is
algorithms
thrown in there. Yeah, I mean, my funny take on that story was that. Just before one of, because we're not a political show, but before one of Trump's rallies, which he was having in, I don't know, Arizona or someplace. No, Tulsa. It was Tulsa, Oklahoma, actually, I remember now.
Yeah.
And all the TikTok users went online and they were buying all the tickets to the rally, which were free. And so it kind of spread wildfire on TikTok. Buy all the tickets.
Oh, yeah, I remember this
story.
story.
All the kids went out, bought all the tickets to the rally, and 7,000 people turned up.
None of these guys
were probably still the biggest rally ever. But it was a case of how TikTok can mess with what's going on. It's a social media thing. I'd say he wasn't particularly enamored by that, but ultimately, he backed Larry Ellison to take over TikTok.
It's a very strange acquisition. I'd love to see what ultimately happens. I mean, I don't know that has it finally gone through.
It hasn't finally gone through. Yeah, I mean, TikTok, which is ByteDance, is the parent company. We're fighting it in the courts. I mean, they're still owned by they're owned by the market predominantly, but Oracle was to become the largest shareholder, and Walmart taking a piece as well. So, and obviously very encouraged by Larry's, one of Larry's best mates, Trump. So that's a story that keeps on giving. I think we'll watch that one into.
And Larry, no doubt, will give us plenty of stories in 2021.
From his island. I think he's moving to Hawaii. Is that what? Did I hear that?
I heard that. Yeah, he's moving to Hawaii. Yeah.
So why is that?
He owns an island there.
He owns an island. Yeah. But he seems to be moving off the mainland.
Well, we won't pass any judgment there. We'll wait for the stories to come out in 2021. We have had our contacts and spies and all our IBM contacts around the world have been giving us a load of stories about what's actually happening in IBM customers. I thought we might run through some of these now, but clearly we can't mention the names of any of the customers, but it's quite incredible, some of the things that have been happening. I love one that I heard only the other day. A audit a claim of $200 million that went down to zero after a bit of interaction. So the initial claim was that there was a
overusage or something.
Overusage is a typical claim. I think Pam talked about this on
ABC.
But actually, the fact that it went to zero shows that actually. So it's exactly like what this particular company did. Is they brought in the right experts to help them. We've obviously lots of these people like Pam we know out there in the marketplace. It wasn't Pam in this case.
Get your defense team.
Get your defense team. Like $200 million that starts out with, that would terrify any organization down to. But then that started, I think, during the summertime.
That's crazy.
And within 6 months, it's actually gone away.
I'd love to know where they got the 200 million figure from.
Yeah,
and that's like we've seen that plenty of times before. We talked about the IRS one with Pam on the show as well. But that was a settlement. The IRS settled for 260 something million over 5 years, and now there's a whistleblower has come out to say that the compliance figures were fabricated. So. And that's in the courts,
Now we don't know the situation here. I mean, in many cases, it could be there was a genuine misunderstanding, but 200 million sounds like a not difficult. Like how do you justify that one? And we've seen this before, not just with IBM. We've seen it before in our own instance a number of years ago, where it started at 15 or 20 million. And down to zero. Down to zero actually is possible. Yeah. It's incredible. We've had, some of the other things that's going on. The bundling that goes on, or the attempts at bundling that goes on. It was an attempt by an IBM sales rep to sell $400,000 of extended support for one product, and then to suggest, you can that's to allow them to keep support on a product they're already paying support on, because the version has become end of life. Okay, this is a typical scenario. You pay this for one of your products. In that mix of products, you pay $400,000,
which is probably double what you're paying already.
Well, we don't know that for sure. Possibly, yeah. But
anything's possible.
Anything's possible. It could be more than double. Who knows? Because the numbers often get pulled. It seems they often get pulled out of thin air. But what happened here is that the deal with 400 seemed reasonable to the customer, apparently.
Yeah.
But it was only on offer if they also bought $2 million of additional products that they had no intention of needing or wanting.
Lovely.
They had no idea whether they needed them.
Catalogs.
It was unbelievable. We had other people who were told that they didn't renew their SNS, that they actually would lose the right to use the software. I'd love to ask our lawyers that one.
Sorry, that's what they were told.
They were told this 100%.
Yeah.
We got this straight back from the mouth of one of the end users. Actually, in this case, that was a particular one straight from an end user.
Yeah.
Like it's unbelievable. These are IBM customers getting told all this information, and the cloud pack. Cloud packs. I mean, what's it with cloud pack? Cloud packs is this term. For those of you who don't know, IBM are obviously, like all the mega vendors, are moving into the cloud, and so they have a new offering. It's not a product.
It's not a cloud.
No, they just put cloud in it so they can bundle everything together. But it's really, really dangerous, actually, because what they're doing is, without being totally upfront and clear to many, many customers, and I don't know about this in all cases, but in the number of cases we've seen and heard back directly from people is that they are saying they're not being clear about it. What they're doing is they're going to them saying, oh, this is just a new way of repackaging your software. You'll get a better deal on your SNS, more features. But actually what they're doing is they're taking away the rights for the software. It's actually a fixed term. They're not telling them this. It's incredible.
So they're losing their perpetual license entitlement, and for what I also know from the packs, the cloud packs, is that it looks like good value as well. So up front it looks like good value. You don't know you're losing your perpetual entitlement, and it's fixed term. But if you look at the costs over multiple years, it's far more expensive than maintaining a perpetual license. So you actually pay a multiple of what you would have otherwise paid. You lose your license right to the and it becomes a term license. So if you stop paying, because then you can't use the product anymore, and you probably got to rebuy the license. So I like a health warning. And there needs to be come with this, and it's this is a kind of caveat emptor, buyer beware. But I think we should actually post a little blog on this to warn customers, because this is
people need to.
This is a horrible kind of tactic.
They shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be doing this because they actually don't need to do this. It's not necessary. It's totally unnecessary. And I think it's a much better tactic to be more transparent with your customers in this day and age. Companies see through it. Companies see through it in a heartbeat, and I can't believe they're still at it. Like all these years later.
Some of them see through, but we've been on calls where customers have been surprised, and only when we've told them, they've actually not understood what
but there's a legacy of trust. You got to remember, with a company like IBM, there's a legacy of trust there. It goes back 20, 30, 40 years. So it's very hard to break that down, but they're doing it. They're doing it, and they still continue to do it.
I'd say, with working remotely as well, you're not able to stare in the eyes of the other guy. That you're the seller at the other side of the table, and you're probably getting a little bit duped. You're probably a bit harried. Everybody's working very hard. Everybody's hard to concentrate, etc. And I'd say, that can be taken advantage of. I mean, I spoke to a guy the other day myself who recently in his company was given the IBM portfolio. The guy who had it before him had retired, and really fair to the guy, he had no real clue as to what was going on. Now, we've offered him a lot of help to give him some advice and guidance, but with that little amount of knowledge, he can only be taken advantage of. There's just so much to know, and there's so many tricks, and there's so many challenges. So, that's will help that. But that's an environment in which IBM will likely take advantage. You don't know what you don't know.
Well, I hope in 2021 we see less of that. And actually, speaking of 2021,
positive outlooks for 21.
Oh yeah, speaking of 2021. I was going to say we were going to have a little prediction. What do we think is going to happen in 2021?
Amateur futurist again.
Do
you want to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah. I think so. Here's what I think is going to happen in 2021. Right. I'm a big believer. My involvement in Free ICT Europe and the regulation side of things in the technology space. We're seeing obviously already through 2020, we've seen a lot of things happen, such as the House Judiciary Committee targeting Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. As you know, there's been a Department of Justice antitrust campaign against Google. There was a Federal Trade Commission and 40 attorney generals of 40 states accusing Google of Facebook rather of gobbling up their rivals. There's even possible changes in law, Section 30 of the Communications Decency Act in the US. So there's already been a lot there in the US. In Europe, we've had there's been warnings to big tech. There's leaks and formal leaks coming out of what's going to be in the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act. Potential fines are between 6% and 10% of global revenues for breaches, and actually big focus on right to repair. Across with changes to the Eco Design Directive. So you've already seen all of this stuff. My prediction is as follows: we're going to see that ramp up even more in both the US and the EU, but we'll also see it in the next part of the world, which is usually it's Europe and US where most things happen. China, because remember what happened with the Ant got pulled their IPO, Jack Ma's Ant organization, financial services company.
Yeah,
they were supposed to be the biggest single IPO ever. 300 billion was going to be their flotation price. So it would have been at the time. Now all these numbers probably in time will all become small, but at 300 billion, that would have made them probably the top 10 floated company in the world at the time. It got pulled due to a row with the Chinese regulator.
Right.
They are going to start flexing their own muscles because they're looking at what's happening in Europe, they're looking at what's happening in the US. And by the way, these regulators all talk to each other. I know between Europe and US, they absolutely talk to each other. And you're going to see some sort of potential joined up thinking there.
Do you think there'll be collaboration between Chinese regulators and...
There's not collaboration. I don't believe there's collaboration, but they do like to know...
ways of thinking?
They do like to know what's going on because all these companies are global at the end of the day. I mean, I know there's restrictions in China, but they still operate... Chinese companies want to operate globally. There's a new administration coming into the United States, which will probably be... I suspect it will carry on some of the same tactics that Trump is, but probably in with different rhetoric. But they'll still be quite hard on China. So they'll have to force Chinese companies to operate a little bit differently, and indeed American companies as well. And Europe will always be a place where there's regulation. So I think you're going to see more of it in 2021. That is my prediction.
Right, okay.
Shoot.
You're probably right. So I've been thinking about this, what's going to happen. And, look at 2020, nobody could have predicted 2020. I'd love to I'm going to read, the Forrester and the Gartner and probably the David Hoole predictions of 2020 and see if any of them are right. But nobody could have predicted the Black Swan event. I know you've read that book. As to what can happen when there's just a single occurrence that just changes the world. But what we've seen is the stocks collapsing immediately on the back of panic, uncertainty, doubt, fear, anxiety, all of those things. And then they rallied because they were well-positioned stocks, the big stocks, the Microsofts, Zoom, Alphabet, etc., well-positioned to take over the remoteness of people's working, education, and because of their cloud infrastructure, remote storage, people are already moving to the cloud. So, but I've been thinking, if there's a vaccine, will it all reverse? So people start coming back into the office and maybe there'll be a reversal of fortunes because the stock prices are at, all-time highs and the Nasdaq is all-time high. So my prediction was going to be that there has to be a reverse. As you mentioned earlier, some of the share prices are at crazy valuations of revenue. So that has to taper off. But then I was reflecting that and I said, actually, no, I changed my mind at the last minute and said, no, it actually will just keep coming, keep on growing. And the reason being is that when actually it does get safer and people start going out and we start spending again, everybody starts spending. Corporations will start spending more. IT budgets will free up. All the tenders that were put on hold will be re-released. And so there'll be that, there is pent-up demand possibly in a different sector of the market, not necessarily with Amazon. There's no pent-up demand there. People are just spending money online. They're crazy and getting deliveries every day. I know because I've been getting them from my daughters. But I think we're going to see a huge amount of pent-up demand with an increase in confidence and an increase in the growth of domestic economies and as GDPs increase year on year over the next 2 years, I think we're going to see a further increase in the fortunes of the tech companies. But I think it'll drop down to the next level. I think the next level of companies will also see the benefit. So my prediction is, and I've been reading about other people's predictions, that the market's going to drop. I think it's just going to keep on going. Now, this comes with a health warning.
Don't follow your investment advice.
Don't follow my investment advice because I'm not an investment advisor. But I actually think, it's going to keep going.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because 2021 needs good news.
We need good news.
And that sounds like a good news story. Yeah. Well, the one thing for sure, Brendan, is in 2021, you and I will be back with our podcast every month.
Sure, yeah.
We will definitely have loads of stories about the mega vendors, because they just are the people who just keep on giving.
Yeah, keep on entertaining.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's been great fun this year. Thank you, and happy Christmas to you.
Yeah, it's been great being on the show.
Yeah,
and we've had some great guests. I'm sure we're going to have some great guests. We'll probably do another 10 or 11 of these in 2021. So I'm really looking forward to it. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all our listeners.
Happy New Year and Merry Christmas, absolutely, to all our listeners. Thank you, and we'll see you all in January.
Yeah, take
Bye.
care.